disengaged families and enmeshed families, they don't function well. In my head. Hello there everybody, if you're new here, I'm Ryan Liberty. I do mental health videos Monday through Friday, and if you want to keep your mental health in check and help me in my mission to humanize mental health, hit subscribe and hit the bell after you hit subscribe to get notified every time that I do a video. Tonight we're talking about enmeshed families and disengaged families. What are the differences between the two? What do we need to know about them? That's what we're covering. So I just started reading Families and Family Therapy, which is by Sal Minuchin. Thank you, Open Library. And this is the creator of family therapy, structural family therapy, excuse me. And it talks about enmeshment and it talks about disengagement and what those are and how they're related to boundaries and families. And it's all very interesting. I only got into the first 3 chapters, but let me relay some of that information here to you. So we'll start with enmeshment. Enmeshment is when there are not proper boundaries between people in a family, and specifically what you have is called diffused boundaries, which means that the boundaries are not very clear. Now, boundaries are supposed to set up what are the roles in a family, and the roles are kind of what helps a family unit to function. They're the rules of the family that allow you to develop as a family and grow together, and these roles will adapt over time. They're not supposed to be rigid and stuck in place, but when they're enmeshed is when they become a problem. So enmeshed boundaries or diffused boundaries is when the family's roles are squished together and they're blurry and they're not so clearly defined. So a clearly defined family, the parents are in authority over the children. The parents work as a unit together, but they also have their own individuality, their own ways of deciding things. But they come together to decide what to do with the children, and the children are below them in that role, and the children learn from them. They grow through the parents' modeling, and this is just the way a typical family works. And that goes along with the development of a child, which is that children can't function on their own. They don't have the coping skills to be able to live and raise themselves, so the parents act as the people to teach them to get along in the world, and that's just the way it goes in a typical normal family. Of course, there's going to be differences with every family, and structural family therapy allows for that. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just talking about what a typical 2-child family looks like. So enmeshment and diffused boundaries would mean something like the parents are becoming friends with the children, or the children are bossing the parents around, or, you know, typically you think of the parents as providing for the children, providing food and providing cleanliness and everything for them. And if you have children that are taking care of each other, maybe the children are cooking for other children, the children are babysitting other children, then the roles are not clearly defined. Now, something else that can happen in an enmeshed family is you may have the parents arguing with each other and they can't handle the stress of the argument, and so one parent tries to get a child in the middle of things, and so the boundary becomes diffused there, where they are aligning with the child and they're breaking the age gap, and they're going against the other parent. And what they're kind of doing there is encouraging the child to become a parent with them and to side against that other parent. And so that would be another example of enmeshed boundaries. But let me quickly move on so that we can cover a lot here and get into what disengaged boundaries are like in disengaged families. So if enmeshed boundaries are where people don't have clearly defined roles and they're just kind of doing their thing, and they might be swapping roles with people, disengaged boundaries are kind of the opposite, and they're either having really rigid roles and adhering to those roles. So like, I am the father and this is what a father does, and this is the only thing that a father does, which is not healthy in any family. It's not adaptable. But typically disengaged people and disengaged families, they separate themselves from the family unit altogether. So you may have a father that stays at work all day, not as a function of the family, but because they don't want to be a part of the family, or a child who rebels and sleeps over other people's houses, again, to leave the family, to not be a part of the family. That would be disengaged boundaries. And both disengaged boundaries and enmeshed boundaries, disengaged families and enmeshed families, they don't function well, and what happens is they lead to these bad patterns in people which then can go on to develop in the person's next family. Like if you were a child in an enmeshed family and you learned these poorly defined roles, you'll go on and have your own family and repeat them with your own family. So if your mother pitted you against your father because they were always getting into arguments, and that's just the way that that enmeshed boundary occurred, then if you happen to be a mother yourself and you grow up and you have a child, you may do the same thing with your spouse, pit them against that spouse, because that's what you learned and that's the pattern that you are used to doing. Now, enmeshed families and disengaged families don't have to be this way forever. This is why we have structural family therapy in the first place, and why a family therapist is useful. If you get a family therapist involved, they can point out when these things are happening, because often when we have a family structure, a family system, we are used to just doing what we've always done. There's unspoken rules that kind of come about. You know, maybe somebody just takes up doing the laundry. Maybe the mother just starts doing the laundry when the spouse meets them before they ever have children, and that just carries out because it's just the way that it always was. And nobody specifically said, like, I'm going to do the laundry or you're going to do the laundry. It's just what happened. And so it continues on, and there could be resentment over that, about the fact that it was never discussed. When you have a child, it could be that the laundry load gets higher and it becomes more difficult, and that may be a period for readjusting. And so we have to re-examine these things, and this is where a family therapist becomes helpful, because a normal, not a normal family, a healthy family, a family that adapts, changes their structure over time, and they adapt depending on the situation that the family's in. You know, sometimes there's a death in the family, sometimes there's a birth, sometimes people move, sometimes somebody loses a job or takes on a job. Maybe now you have two spouses working instead of one. And maybe an elderly person moves in with the family, an elderly parent of the spouse. And so all of these situations create stress, and the family has to deal with that stress, and they kind of have to renegotiate the roles in the family to be able to do that. And this is where a family therapist can help in cases where the family is not able to figure it out for themselves. Now, something else that we need to be aware of when it comes to disengagement and enmeshment is that these are normal parts of a family. This is something that we just need to go through sometimes as a family. When we have outside stressors or maybe even internal stressors, sometimes it's appropriate to be enmeshed. For example, when we're going through a period where we're moving, it may be appropriate for children to take on roles that they normally wouldn't take on, and for parents to grow closer to children to get us through the move, the physical moving of everything that we're doing. And it may also be appropriate, let's say, if one of the parents has to go off to war. Maybe they're engaged in the military, and so that would be an appropriate time to be disengaged from the family for a period, and of course come back and rejoin the family. So a healthy family adjusts, and they react to the stressors and they can manage it. It's when they become stuck in these rigid patterns that they're in, and they don't have anybody from the outside pointing out those patterns and helping them to change them, that it becomes a problem. If you're somebody who's been in one of these families, specifically if you're a child of an enmeshed family or a family that's been disengaged, you probably have trouble setting boundaries and forming consequences to those boundaries and getting your needs met. So I have some worksheets up on my Patreon page. They are free for you. I'll put the link above. They are not a substitute for therapy, but they may be very helpful in addition to therapy. So I encourage you to check those out if that's something that you're interested in. I'd love to hear from you if you're somebody who comes from an enmeshed family or a disengaged family, and what has your experience been like? I'd love to hear your personal experience, because we talk about it theoretically, but that doesn't kind of give that vibe that I'm looking for here on this channel, that humanizing mental health vibe that I'm going for. So let me know what your experience is. Share that down below so we can learn from each other. And of course, if you're new here, please subscribe. I do mental health videos Monday through Friday. I have over 200 other videos on these topics, and I'm still going, so check them out. As always, I thank you for being here, and I'll see you around next time.